Chapter 3. Roma. The grass trembled the day Romulus left for good. Though he didn't seem to have a clear plan, he was learning to trust his intuition. Into the fields, which they escaped into the night before, Laine and Romulus, like two sleep-deprived travelers, were on what felt like a very long and uncertain road until dawn. He could not let his family go, but he could not stay either. He was afraid of the powerful person he was becoming, but knew he had to become him anyway. The rough sketch of the person she could be, as she strove to become her, taking small steps each day. It was impossible to know what they would reach. It was unnerving, like traveling to a foreign land for the first time. They walked all day, but it seemed different than before, slower and more cautious at first, but like they were finally headed in the right direction. It was miraculous what they came across next. Parked at the edge of the clearing was Mertes' caravan. Romulus rapped twice at Mertes' door. "Can we rest a while here?" he asked. It was like sleeping on a friend's couch when trying to get your shit together. "Of course," Mertes said. "Come." She led Romulus into the table and gave him the porridge-like substance she was cooking over the hearth. The cabin smelled like a rich, deep vegetable broth. Laine didn't mind sitting on her haunches at the door. It gave her a chance to get her wind back. After he was done eating, Mertes led them to an overhang near a fire pit. Romulus built a fire. Despite the mass peril going on, for the first time in a long time, Laine felt optimistic about her future and her ability to change things. Laine realized she was capable of doing more than just follow Romulus. She had led him to the truth. She was not powerless or lost in a flock. She hoped to serve in other ways too. The information she brought with her from the future was crucial to preserving what was left of the land and animal life in the small region of Italy. Preserving nature was about confirming and expanding her own wilderness also, her true nature, and what made her most authentic. The things that made her multi-faceted, magical, and unexplainable. Yet she would never forget who she was or where she came from, her humble beginnings. For Laine, it would have been the equivalent of sitting in the most opulent of Roman baths and still dream about the hole-in-the-ground hot springs of her youth that smelled of eggs. All she'd originally wanted was to be a simple country girl, to live in Montana her whole life, surrounded by the people she'd always known. And yet here she was, destined for something else, it seemed. Still, part of her would always yearn for that fantasy and sweetness of her youth. She would always be a simple country girl at heart. Home, home on the range, where the skies are not cloudy all day, that I could not change my home on the range for all the city so bright. The next day, dew covered the grass, and Laine watched the water fall from the overhang and roll down her pelt. She'd fallen asleep with her legs tucked in, and now she was trying to get the pins and needles feeling to go away. Mom had said when she had to be careful where she stepped because her mom, Laine's Wyoming grandma, always left the pins and needles around carelessly. Romulus brought her attention back as he moved his hand along her hoof and patted her hip, and she nestled her head close to him so he could give her head a rub. Why hadn't he thought of it before? This time he knew exactly where to go. She could see it in his eyes, and it was like he had planned the day of the Latin festival. What time was it anyway? It must not have been yet 2 a.m. slowly urging her up. On walking, Laine felt the extent of her days, of marching through the trenches, and was slow to move. The bad thing about being a sheep, she thought, was she didn't even have time to rest, because during her resting period, she had to chew her own regurgitated cud. That's just what she had to do for proper digestion, and she had more than one stomach, apparently. In the same way, even though the digestion of it was hard, though there was still much she didn't understand, and it was still dark and hard work, writing her fantasy into reality was beginning to shift something in her. She understood Romulus's determination, and knew at this point of her journey it was all or nothing. But it was not all cozy like the fireplace in her familial home. She was being exposed to more things going on than she'd seen before, and finally starting to take off her rose-colored glasses. What they called the disease had wiped out many of the sheep, and they were lying in heaps, and one man was about to light fire to their bodies. But was it a disease? Somehow she felt more prepared for this and was no longer afraid, walking along the crippled and bent bodies of her brethren. Up until now, Laine had not seen the lake from this side, tinged with darkness. It was the side that Remus would supervise if he were to become councilman, and this decision would be made at the Latin festival. It was all but done. He had no competitors. As they neared the familiar waterfall from a new vantage point, Laine spotted more trails as they got into denser woodland, which opened up to the more mountainous region of the Alban Hills. More unknown territory, great, she said. She realized they were taking a different route, climbing straight towards the palace, though this windy stone staircase made of rock. At the base of the mountain, beyond the one with the backwards upside-down L, Romulus stopped and was looking up. It followed switchbacks to a high altitude, but the stone steps built inside the mountain were near too steep. Like Trapper Peak on steroids, Laine heard the ceremony going on uphill, and the small lights of lanterns, like the ones Mertes had given them. She felt safe. It was like going with Dad in his semi when she was young. She sometimes curled up on the floorboards where the master heater was. She felt safe even though she could see the road running fast below from a tiny crack in the interior. She didn't know if Romulus could see the danger. Maybe he felt safe too, because he ascended the mountain towards the noise. She stumbled over the steps, following him and looking down at the more innate mosaic designs on the steps and the wall around them. Thanks for watching my video, guys. I'll be back with another video next Wednesday. Until then, ciao!